Alright everyone, I hope you're doing well out there. Quite a few of my drawings that I've shown on this channel have just been character creation or just fun ideas from sketchbooks. But every now and again there's one of those sketchbook ideas that comes along and changing everything. This is one of those moments. Today I thought I'd show you how I drew it and explain why it ended up being one of the most important images in the whole project. Today I thought I'd show you how I drew this illustration and explain why it ended up becoming one of the most important images in the whole project. If you've ever wondered how a single drawing can grow into an entire story, you're in the right place. I actually filmed this years ago for Instagram, back when everything I made was in portrait format, so I've had to be a bit creative putting this video together. How I managed to squeeze it into a 2-minute reel I don't know. It's been hard enough editing it down to 8 minutes for this video. I wanted to share the full drawing process rather than leave it sat on a hard drive forever, because this drawing turned out to be far more important than I ever imagined. It started as a Halloween themed Inktober sketch. One thing I've always liked about Inktober is that it forces you to think sideways. You get a single word prompt and you've just got to come up with an idea, often quite quickly, but words can take you in all sorts of directions. The prompt might be circle, which becomes a ring, and a ring becomes a donut, and before you know it, you've gone from sugary goodness to a car doing a burnout. I've been doing Inktober for quite a few years now, but I found some prompts left me spending hours on drawings that I had no real connection to, so I made a conscious decision to bend prompts towards my personal projects, and in more recent years, towards Teef Fur and the crew. That way, every drawing had a purpose, and each one was another brick in the world I was building. And every now and again, one of them opened a door that I wasn't expecting. I've always loved stories where ordinary life collides with the supernatural. Ghostbusters, Buffy, Hellboy, Stranger Things. A mix of humour, adventure and mystery has always appealed to me. Up until this drawing though, I'd never really explored those ideas in the Teef Fur world. So when the prompt was rise, zombies seemed the obvious choice. At that time though, I wasn't thinking, here's a major story moment, I just thought, zombies, they'll be fun to draw. This drawing was also a bit of an experiment for me. I began my career in traditional storyboarding with markers. One wrong move with a big black area and you've ruined the page. And that's one reason I now work digitally a lot, because Ctrl-Z is your best mate. So I deliberately push myself outside my comfort zone. Because this illustration is only black and white, every solid black shape becomes important. You're not just relying on colour anymore, you're relying on contrast, silhouette and where you want the viewer's eye to go. At this point, Teef Fur still wasn't really a comic, it was a collection of characters and situations. I wasn't thinking in chapters or story arcs, I just enjoyed putting these characters into interesting scenarios. What I did care about was making sure their personalities come across, often without a single line of dialogue. Teef, in the cap, walks confidently ahead. He's naturally optimistic and he always assumes things will work out. Fur, in the beanie, hangs back. In many ways he's actually the tougher of the pair, but he's much more cautious. He's the sort of character who's already wondering whether taking a shortcut through the graveyard at night is really such a good idea. Hopefully their body language tells you all that before they've even said a word. As I mentioned, until this point I hadn't added dialogue, but because I'm pushing boundaries, just for fun, I had a speech bubble. This is the first time ever I gave one of these characters a voice. I wanted Teef's voice to sound like the sort of lads I grew up around. Unmistakably East London, confident, cheeky and full of local expressions. He's the sort of bloke who's always convinced everything's going to be alright, even when it clearly ain't. I also deliberately avoided the classic dead twisted horror trees. I wanted it to feel more like a real London cemetery, somewhere that's looked after, somewhere people still visit, somewhere that just happens to become the setting for something very strange. Also, I couldn't resist hiding a few little references in the gravestones. If you're a Walking Dead fan, you might recognise a few names. I love hiding Easter eggs like that. Most people won't notice them first time round, but they're there for anyone who enjoys picking through the artwork. For this drawing I only used 4 pens, a Winsor & Newton Pro marker for the solid black areas, Unipin fineliners in 0.2 and 0.5 and a Unipin brush pen. I still wouldn't say I've mastered the brush pen. It's a brilliant tool. It can produce some really bold strokes and incredibly fine lines from the same pen. I often use a digital brush pen when using Procreate. It's a fantastic tool. As the drawing develops, our heroes are completely unaware of what's happening behind them, but we can already see the hand beginning to emerge. I wanted the audience to know something that the characters didn't. It's that classic horror film moment where you're sat shouting at the screen, "Behind you!" And that's really where everything changed. Not because there were zombies, but because of the questions the drawings left me with. Where are Teef and Fur actually going? Why did they choose to cut through the cemetery? Why are there zombies? Is there someone responsible? What happens next? Those questions stayed with me long after I'd finished the illustration. Although I've always loved horror films, science fiction and supernatural stories, I'd never put Teef and Fur into that kind of situation before. Up until this point, they'd mostly found themselves in funny or adventurous scrapes. This was the first time I wondered, what if there are things in this world that the characters don't fully understand? I don't think Teef and Fur is a horror story, and I don't really want it to be, but I realised that letting the occasional supernatural element creep into the world made it feel much bigger. Suddenly there were mysteries hiding beneath the surface. Some of those questions I now have answers for, and some I'm still working on. The moon was another area I really wanted people to look at. Rather than just sticking with a white circle in the sky, I wanted it to feel like another focal point, full of texture and detail. Not long after this, I drew the Cthulhu illustration, which pushed those ideas even further. It wasn't really about drawing monsters, it was about discovering that this world had room for the unexpected. If you'd like to see that one, I'll leave a link below. And I think that's really how stories begin. Not by having every answer, but by asking the right questions. Who, what, where, when, why and how. Every answer leads to another question, and before you know it, you've gone from drawing a single picture to building an entire world. Looking back now, I had no idea this little Inktober sketch would influence so much of what Teef and Fur has become. Sometimes the most important drawings aren't the ones you spend the longest on. They're the ones that make you wonder, what happens next? Thanks for watching. If you're enjoying the Teef and Fur updates, there's plenty more story and behind the scenes stuff to come. Please give the like and subscribe button a little nudge. All support for my project is greatly appreciated. See you next week.